In the silent stillness of night, a young girl wandered into the bush, searching for firewood her family desperately needed. But hidden among the leaves, she stumbled upon something that would shatter her innocence forever. A faint cry pierced the silence. A newborn, wrapped in a torn cloth glowing faintly under the moonlight. Her heart froze. Who would abandon a baby here? And why did fate choose her to find it? What she didn't know was that this single moment would become the beginning of a chain of events that would change her life in ways she could never imagine. The girl's name was Amina. She was only 12, but life had forced her to grow up fast. Her family lived in a crumbling hut at the edge of the village, surviving on scraps her mother earned from washing clothes. Every day felt like a battle between hunger and hope. That night, Amina had wandered deeper into the bush than usual. The village was dark, its few lanterns flickering weakly. Her little brothers had gone to sleep hungry again, and she promised herself she would return with enough wood to cook something in the morning. But as she bent down to gather branches, she heard it, a soft whimper almost swallowed by the rustling leaves. At first she thought it was a wounded animal, but when she pushed aside the tall grass, her breath caught in her throat. There, lying helpless and fragile, was a baby wrapped in rags. Its tiny fists moved weakly, its eyes glowing in the faint moonlight. Amina's heart pounded. She looked around, but the bush was silent. No mother, no footsteps, nothing but shadows. Fear gripped her, but so did something stronger, a strange pull as though fate had placed this child directly into her trembling hands. She didn't know what to do. Take it home? Leave it? Tell someone her young mind couldn't understand it yet, but deep inside she knew one thing. This was no ordinary baby. And from this moment on, nothing in her life would ever be the same. The night air felt heavy as Amina carefully lifted the baby. It was lighter than she expected, as though hunger had already begun to steal its strength. She pressed it close, her small arms trembling with both fear and protectiveness. When she returned home, her mother's eyes widened in shock. "Where did you find this child?" she whispered, her voice a mixture of fear and sorrow. But before Amina could explain, the baby began to cry again, soft but piercing, a sound that filled their tiny hut. Her brothers woke up startled, staring at the fragile stranger in their sister's arms. Word spread quickly through the village. By morning, whispers filled the air. Some said the baby was cursed. Others claimed it belonged to a woman who had been forced away after being accused of breaking tribal rules. A few believed it was a child abandoned by someone too poor to care for it. But whatever the truth, one thing was clear. No one wanted to take responsibility. And in a place where survival was already cruel, another mouth to feed was seen as a burden too heavy to carry. Amina, however, felt differently. She couldn't explain why, but she felt a bond with the child, like their fates had been tied together. Each night she rocked the baby to sleep, whispering promises it couldn't yet understand. Each day she faced the judgmental stares of her neighbors, who muttered words about bad luck and misfortune. Her own family began to struggle even more. With little food left, arguments broke out. Her mother questioned whether keeping the baby was even possible. And yet, every time Amina looked into its small, trusting eyes, she knew she couldn't let go. But soon the true weight of her choice began to show. Villagers accused her of harboring a curse. The village chief warned her mother that such a child might bring shame to them all. And as tensions grew, Amina began to realize this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about fighting against a world that had already decided her fate. And now, the baby's fate too. The struggle was no longer just hunger. It was injustice, fear, and the crushing weight of being powerless in a society that turned its back on the weakest. The breaking point came one stormy evening. Rain pounded the ground, lightning split the sky, and the chief's men arrived at their hut. They declared the baby had to be taken away, that its presence would bring ruin to the village. Amina's mother wept, powerless to resist. The villagers gathered outside, watching with cold eyes. But Amina stood frozen, her small frame shielding the baby in her arms. Her heart raced, but she refused to move. One of the men reached for the child, but Amina clung tighter, shouting with a strength she never knew she had. The baby cried loudly as though sensing the danger. The chief stepped forward, his voice booming above the storm. "This child is not yours. Hand it over." But in that moment, something inside Amina broke free. For years, she had been silent, accepting poverty, accepting hunger, accepting injustice, but not this time, not this child. Her voice cracked with emotion as she cried out, "If this baby is cursed, then so am I. If you take it, you take me too." The crowd gasped. Even the chief hesitated, struck by the fire in her eyes. The storm raged on, but in that instant, the village witnessed something rare. The defiance of a child who had nothing yet stood against everything. The men lowered their hands. The chief, perhaps unwilling to drag a child into the storm by force, gave a final warning and walked away. Slowly, the crowd dispersed, leaving only Amina, her family, and the crying baby under the leaking roof of their hut. From that night on, something changed. The villagers no longer whispered curses when they saw her. Some still disapproved, but others began to admire the courage she showed. Neighbors quietly began leaving scraps of food near their door. For the first time, compassion stirred where judgment once ruled. As the baby grew, so did Amina. She learned responsibility, strength, and the power of resilience. She became known not as the poor girl who wandered the bush, but as the child who defied fear to protect another life. And though life never became easy, she discovered something more valuable than comfort: the ability to fight for what is right even when the world tells you not to. Years later, Amina would look back at that stormy night and realize that the baby wasn't just abandoned. It was given to her by fate. A test, a burden that became her strength, a helpless cry that awakened her voice. Sometimes the smallest discoveries carry the greatest power, and sometimes the poorest girl can become the bravest of them all, simply because she chose not to look away. So ask yourself, when life places something fragile in your hands, do you see it as a burden or as a chance to change everything? This story is a work of fiction inspired by cultural themes and real-life struggles. It is created for entertainment and reflection, not to represent any specific individual or event.